Our self-driving future is closer than you think. This new revolutionary technology is coming, and it is going to have a big impact on each one of our lives. Self-driving car enthusiasts hail this technology as a solution for many of our problems, such as congestion, traffic, crashes, and even emissions. But what might be some other consequences of this technology? Is it going to be all good for everyone? Hi, this is Deepak, and in this presentation, I'm going to be discussing what some of the unintended consequences of this technology might be and how it is going to impact some of the industries that are dependent on transportation today. So let's get started. Self-driving cars will create three major shifts impacting industries. Number one, there are no more drivers, meaning there's no need for hands-off entertainment. This will have a big impact on the radio industry. Number two, eyeballs will move from outside the car to inside the car, making billboards and hoardings less attractive. And number three, ride-sharing will change car ownership patterns, and car manufacturing and sales industries will have to adapt to these changing business models. Before cars, our cities were a lot more compact. Streets were ruled by pedestrians, and public transport and biking were the main means of transportation. Cars, however, decreased urban density, created the suburb as we know it today, and created many businesses that were only uniquely possible in a driving world. In fact, since the introduction of cars in the early 1900s, the road network in the US has grown 2 times in length and multiplied 10 times in capacity. And although automobiles have been a net positive for the economy, the environmental impact was an unintended consequence that was only realized decades after cars became mainstream. Now, will self-driving cars also have some consequences that are unintended? Before I go there, I would like to do a quick comparison. If you look at cars from the early 1900s, you will notice that they looked very similar to horse-drawn carriages that preceded them. This was because they were trying to adapt to the existing infrastructure of the day. Now, if you look at self-driving pilots, you will notice that they look very similar to manual cars today, with just a bunch of sensors attached onto them. This is for the exact same reason. Self-driving cars today are trying to adapt to the existing infrastructure, just as how automobiles were trying to adapt to a horse-drawn world a century ago. This is how early on in the life cycle of self-driving cars we are. There's so much we do not know, which is why it makes it extremely important to start thinking about the consequences and unintended consequences of this technology. The first industry that I'll be talking about today is the radio industry. It's a valid question to ask. Would radio still be needed in a driverless world? Radio has been the most popular medium of in-car entertainment since it was introduced back in the 1920s. Cars also provide the maximum share of listenership to radio. This number was as high as 93% as recently as 2017. This is mostly because radio provides passive entertainment, does not distract drivers, and is universally available. To understand why radio might be threatened in a self-driving world, it is important to understand why cars and radio are so deeply linked. Prior to TVs, radio was the main form of broadcast and entertainment in homes. However, in the 1950s, radio lost that position and TVs became the dominant form of entertainment at homes. But the threat of self-driving cars is bigger. Will radio be able to compete when multiple internet-connected screens inside cars are also vying for passengers' attention? Video on-demand services, streaming services, live news, sports, all of this will be available as alternatives. Radio is still the easiest means to broadcast and receive news, and it could use it to deliver hyperlocal news and events coverage. Radio must also shift to being available on demand, and perhaps radio could even utilize screens to provide a more interactive experience. Radio has a tough challenge ahead of itself, and it will need to reinvent itself to stay competitive. The second industry that I'll be talking about today is the physical advertising industry. What happens to billboards and hoardings when drivers don't have to look outside the cars? Billboards and hoardings account for the biggest chunk of out-of-home advertisements. In fact, in 2012, billboards accounted for more than $4 billion worth of total spending, bringing in more than $25 billion in revenue for those companies. To understand why self-driving cars might threaten this industry, let's think about why billboards work and who are they intended for. Billboard advertisements are designed to cater to the most captive audience in cars, the driver. So what happens when drivers don't need to keep their eyes on the road? Well, billboards may not get enough eyeballs to keep them profitable. As screens proliferate the car cabin, so does the possibility of targeted digital ads. The car could know exactly who the passenger is and could curate ads specifically for them. The ads could be localized and targeted at the same time. top 200 businesses in the US have consistently increased their digital marketing spend while reducing their traditional marketing spend over the last few years. In addition, 76% of US retail marketers have had a greater return on investment for digital ads versus offline ads in 2016. This is where it gets interesting though. Since fully autonomous cars are still ways off, billboards are expected to perform better as cars become semi-autonomous. In these modes, drivers will still need to look outside the car, ready to take control when prompted. This will allow drivers to pay more attention to billboards and hoardings, increasing their effectiveness in the short term. However, in a fully autonomous world, billboards are most likely going to be rendered irrelevant. The third industry that I'll be talking about today is vehicle manufacturing and sales. How are these industries going to be impacted because of ride-sharing and self-driving cars? Car manufacturing industry is in a unique position when it comes to self-driving cars. Car companies are creating the technology that has the potential to significantly impact their own business. Here's what I mean by that. There are three major trends happening in the car industry as of now. Number 1, electrification. Number 2, self-driving. And number 3, ride-sharing. Ride-sharing, coupled with self-driving technology, it is expected to cut car ownership rates by 43%, reducing number of vehicles per household from 2.1 to 1.2. But does this mean that car manufacturers will be selling far fewer cars? Most likely not. Currently, the average lifespan of a car in the US is 11.4 years. In a ride-sharing world, cars are expected to be on the road for most of the time, reducing their lifespan to only 6.5 years. This will allow car manufacturers to replace cars faster, and the rate at which car technology progresses would nearly double. Also, car companies would now be selling to fleets and ride-sharing companies. This will completely upend the priorities of car manufacturers. I interviewed David Silver, head of the School of Autonomous Systems at Udacity, regarding self-driving cars, and he compared ride-sharing to the airline industry.
Right now it matters a lot to people whether you buy a Ford or a BMW or a Tesla.
Right.
But it doesn't really matter. If you're buying a plane ticket, you don't really care that much. Are you flying a Boeing or an Airbus or an Embraer?
Right.
And in the future, you may not care so much. You may care more about are you riding Uber or Lyft or something else, and less about is your car a Ford or a BMW or something.
This could mean that instead of caring about whether you're in a Ford or BMW, you could care about whether you're in a Netflix-enabled Uber X or an ad-supported Uber Express pool. This commoditization of cars would actually be highly detrimental to high-end car manufacturers, as their strengths on the driving experience won't be valued as much. On the other hand, car companies that currently produce cars for fleets are much better positioned to transition to a ride-sharing and self-driving world. This brings me to the conclusion that self-driving cars are going to be pretty great, but they're also going to have some consequences that we did not intend for. I know I am cautiously excited for them. I hope you are too. Thank you so much.